I got the divorce papers by email while I was still in the desert. 15 years of marriage ended in a PDF attachment. My name is Mark. I'm 40 years old, a sergeant first class with the 101st Airborne. I had been deployed in Helmand Province for nearly 5 months when Lauren decided she'd waited long enough. The subject line said, "Let's handle this like adults." The message was short, barely 4 lines. She'd already filed. She'd already drained the joint checking account. And she'd already moved her new boyfriend, Adam, into our house back in Boise. I read it twice, shut my laptop, took a shower in the shared stall, suited up for the night patrol, and didn't say a word to anyone. When I got back to my cot that night, I sent one word in response. Noted. No begging, no drama, no threats, just clarity. My tent mate, Harris, glanced over from his bunk and asked, "Everything cool back home?" without looking up from his copy of Band of Brothers. "Yeah," I said. "Just stuff." He nodded. That was all. Out here we don't push when a guy goes quiet. But the truth is, I wasn't shocked. Half a year before deployment, the cracks had started forming. They weren't loud, they were subtle. She stopped texting midday. She didn't ask about my training anymore. She was staying late at the vet clinic where she worked reception. She hit the gym 4 times a week, but never mentioned soreness, new makeup, new outfits, friends I never met, and a passcode on her phone. I didn't accuse her, I didn't snoop. That's not who I am. But I saw it, so I made some moves of my own. Nothing crazy, just steps to protect myself. I rented a small storage unit across town and put what mattered most inside. My birth certificate. The title to the truck, only in my name, courtesy of a military loan. Benefits paperwork. The flag from my father's funeral. My grandmother's wedding ring. I also opened a separate checking account at a credit union she didn't know about. I rerouted a small chunk of my monthly deposit into it, not enough to set off alarms, but enough that I wouldn't be starting from zero if the bottom fell out. The day before I left, she hugged me at the airport and said, "Take care of yourself, okay?" Her voice was light, her eyes dry, like she was saying goodbye to someone from HR, not her husband boarding a transport to a combat zone. I should have seen it clearly then. But part of me still hoped I was just being cautious. I wasn't. What Lauren never realized was that I'd prepared for this. And what she never understood is that I don't go looking for conflict, but I sure as hell know how to finish it. I first met Lauren at a friend's backyard cookout in the summer of 2011. I was back home between deployments, crashing at my buddy Greg's place in Boise. She was wrapping up a degree in physical therapy, but ended up taking a front desk job at a chiropractic clinic instead. Said it was just easier, less demanding. We got married 9 months later. Lauren used to say she was proud of what I did in the military, though she never really grasped what it meant. Her dad ran a regional accounting firm. Her sister was a pediatrician. No one in her family had ever served. Every now and then, she'd ask when I planned on settling down and getting a real job, like the army was just something to keep me busy until I figured life out. She didn't understand that after more than a decade in uniform, it was my life. We bought a house together in 2015. Nothing flashy. 3 bedrooms, a little fenced yard, a street full of retired couples and kids riding bikes. The mortgage was in my name only, courtesy of the VA loan, but I added her to the deed, because that's what marriage meant to me, sharing everything. My dad passed away the year after we tied the knot. Heart failure, right there in the driveway while clearing ice off the windshield. Mom died a few years after that. Lung cancer. Never smoked a day in her life. They didn't leave a fortune behind, but it was enough to help clear out Lauren's student debt and put something aside for emergencies. Over the course of our marriage, I deployed 4 times, twice to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan. And every time I came back, she felt a little farther away. Less patient, more distant. Like the life we had built together didn't quite fit anymore. "I didn't sign up for this military wife routine," she said once, after I mentioned re-enlisting for another term. "I'm tired of spending half my life waiting for you to come home." I got it. I really did. But the Army was where I felt useful, where I was respected, where I knew who I was. It made sense to me in a way civilian life never had. By 2020, things had started shifting. Little things at first. She'd get annoyed if I texted her during girls' nights, started dropping comments about how her friend Rachel had left her husband and was finally living for herself. Told me we barely had anything in common anymore. I brought up the idea of therapy. She said we didn't need it, that we were just in a slump. But then came the long hours at work, the weekend getaways with people I'd never met, the sudden wardrobe refresh, the fancy yoga studio she rarely seemed to attend. I could feel her pulling away, but I didn't push. That's never been my way. My father always told me to think before I speak, to be certain before I act. So I watched. I kept quiet. I listened to my instincts, because when you've seen enough, you know your gut rarely lies. And something inside me had been warning me for a while. Something was coming. 2 weeks after I got the divorce email, I was in the chow hall eating lunch when my phone buzzed. A notification popped up from the bank app. Another withdrawal, $8,200. Nearly everything that was left. I set my tray aside and opened the app. The joint checking account balance read $190.45. The savings? All $43,000 of it, gone. Transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Across the table, Ramirez from my unit glanced up. "Everything good?" I locked my phone screen. "Yeah, just banking stuff." That night, I made a call from the comm center, spoke to a representative at the bank. Turns out Lauren had been slowly draining the accounts for weeks, first in small, unnoticed amounts, then larger chunks. The heavy transfers began the day after I shipped out. I hung up and leaned against the wall, the hum of soldiers chatting behind me. Guys were on calls with their families, laughing, making plans. Life was moving forward for everyone else, while mine felt like it had hit a wall. That's when Harris showed up. "Heard from Miller you weren't yourself at dinner," he said. "You all right?" I'm not usually the type to share personal crap, but Harris once dragged me out of a firefight outside Jalalabad. He'd earned my trust. "My wife cleaned out our accounts," I told him. "Moved her boyfriend into our house. Sent divorce papers last week while I was on patrol." He didn't offer the usual lines. No half-hearted sympathy or cliches. He just asked, "So, what's your plan?" "Don't have one yet," I replied. He gave a nod. "Whatever you decide, I've got your six." I didn't sleep much that night. Instead, I opened my laptop and logged into the home security system, something Lauren probably forgot I could access remotely. I watched footage from the past week. A truck I didn't recognize parked in our driveway. A guy I'd never seen before walking our dog, sipping from my coffee mug, wearing my old Broncos hoodie. And there was Lauren, smiling in the kitchen I'd remodeled with my own hands during my last leave. Something shifted in me. It wasn't rage. It was colder, sharper, more precise. I closed the laptop, unlocked my phone, and opened a blank note. First item on the list. Call Darren. Old Army buddy, now a practicing attorney. Review the terms of the VA loan. Reach out to Sergeant Major about the process for emergency leave. Double-check the refinance paperwork Lauren had casually mentioned last fall. Secure the login to my pension account. Make sure there were no red flags. I wasn't feeling heartbroken anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was dialed in, focused like I was prepping for an op. This wasn't personal now. It was tactical. At 04:45, before morning roll call, I sent an encrypted email to Darren with the subject line, "Need legal help, discreet and immediate." His response hit my inbox an hour later. "Call me. Secure line only." I used the comm room, locked the door, and by the time I hung up the phone, I knew exactly how this was going to go. No raised voices, no threats, no need for a dramatic confrontation. I was going to let the facts speak for themselves. Her own moves would become her undoing. 2 months later, I landed stateside. I didn't tell Lauren I was coming home, no texts, no voicemails. I checked into a cheap motel outside Boise under a different name and called Darren. We met at a diner off Highway 21, the kind of place where no one asks questions. "You look like you've been dragged through sand and fire," Darren said as he slid into the booth. "Feels about right," I replied. He handed me a manila folder. "It's all here," he said. We went through it: property deeds, bank transfers, loan records, and then he pulled out one more document. "This one's interesting," he added, laying a printout on the table. It was a refinance form with my name on it. Or at least, it was supposed to be. "That's not my signature," I said before he could finish. The middle initial was off. The slant wasn't right. Someone had copied it, but not well. "Lauren submitted it 3 months ago," Darren confirmed. "Used the house as collateral. Took out $28,000. Problem is, your approval is required for any equity withdrawal. You didn't sign it, which means it's fraud." I stared at the page. She forged my name, pulled cash from the house tied to my VA loan, then emptied our accounts and served me divorce papers while I was deployed. "She's been busy," he said. "Oh, and she listed her boyfriend as the co-applicant. Guy's name is Eric. 2 DUIs and a fraud conviction back in 2018. I let out a slow breath. "So, what are my options?" Darren leaned back. "Plenty. Depends what you want out of this." I thought about it carefully. I want what I've earned, and I want her to face the consequences of trying to take it from me. Darren gave a nod, his expression shifting into something sharper. "Then here's the plan." The next morning, I drove through our old neighborhood. The house looked the same, but everything felt different. Her boyfriend's truck wasn't there, but Lauren's car sat in the driveway. I parked a few houses down and sat in the vehicle for a while, staring at the front door. Part of me considered walking up and knocking, demanding an explanation. But I already knew the truth. But that wasn't part of the mission. Instead, I drove to the bank, met with the loan manager who had signed off on the refinance, presented my military ID, then laid out the original signature on my driver's license side by side with the forged one on their forms. His expression shifted from confusion to dread. "This needs to be escalated," he murmured. I nodded. "Already filed a report with the sheriff's department," I replied calmly. That night I got a message from Elise. "Who have you been talking to at Wellside Credit? Liam said someone was digging around." I didn't reply. The next morning, I went straight to the county clerk's office, filed a formal dispute of the refinance based on forged consent, and submitted documentation barring any legal modifications to the property without my personal appearance. 2 days later, Elise called. I let it ring into voicemail. "Caleb, we need to talk. The bank's calling about the house. What is going on? If this is about the divorce, let's be civil about it." Those same words again, like the subject line of the email she'd sent from thousands of miles away. Still, I said nothing. That afternoon, Grant, my attorney, called. "We've locked the equity funds. Also, something came up. That truck you told me her boyfriend's been driving? The one under your name? He got pulled over this morning." "Driving without a license?" I guessed. "Worse. Suspended license from 2 prior offenses. They towed the vehicle and ran an inventory. Guess what they found?" "Let me guess. Something illegal." "Not quite, but just as interesting. Prescription slips from the clinic where Elise works, and they were already filled out." I exhaled, jaw tightening. "So now it's prescription fraud. Looks that way. Local PD's involved now." I ended the call and sat there, the motel light flickering above me. I had half a mind to call Elise, give her one last out. But then I remembered the surveillance footage, my dog, my home, my chair by the window, all casually claimed by someone else. Number. That moment was gone. The next morning, I met with the bank's internal fraud specialist. His name was Reed, mid-50s, worn-out look, navy blazer with a coffee ring on the lapel. "You'd be surprised how often we see this," he said, while flipping through documents. "Deployment creates space, and sometimes that space gets filled with bad choices." "What happens next?" I asked. "We've frozen the refinance access, but it's not a clean slate. Some of the payouts already withdrawn." "How much?" I asked. "Roughly half. 14.6, I leaned in. "Where'd the money go?" I asked. Ellison hesitated. Technically, I'm not authorized to disclose that. I leaned forward. It's my name on the deed, my signature that was forged, and my equity that vanished. He gave a reluctant nod, then swiveled his monitor toward me. These are the outgoing transactions from the refinance disbursement. My eyes skimmed the screen. Several large transfers had been made to someone named Patrick Dorsey, not Liam, someone entirely new to me. Who the hell is Patrick Dorsey? I asked. Ellison shrugged. You'll want your attorney to issue a subpoena. That's out of my jurisdiction. As soon as I stepped out of the bank, I called Grant. Patrick Dorsey, I said. Any clue who that is? Give me a bit, he replied. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. Got him. Dorsey's a realtor, deals mostly in fast cash home flips. No open listings in your area right now, but he's definitely active. Guess what else? Hit me, I said, already bracing. He's worked with Liam Carter before. Your wife's new partner? Yeah, I muttered, feeling the weight of it settle in my chest. They've closed 3 property sales in the last couple years. Same pattern. Below market, quick turnover, cash buyers. I sat down on a bench outside the courthouse, staring blankly at the trees. So this wasn't just Elise walking out with some new boyfriend. This was a setup. It's looking more like a pattern, Grant said carefully. I ran Carter's background. This isn't his first time with a situation like yours. At least 3 cases involving women in volatile relationships, 1 going through a messy divorce, 2 whose husbands were deployed. Each time, Dorsey handles the property sale. It goes cheap, flips fast, and Carter ends up with a payout. I exhaled slowly. And Elise? Unclear. Could be she's another Mark. Could be she's in on it. My fingers dug into my knees. This wasn't just betrayal. It was exploitation. Targeted, methodical, and likely not isolated. What's next? I asked. I've already reached out to the federal guys, Grant replied. This touches federal benefits, housing fraud, and possibly conspiracy. FBI's Financial Crimes Unit is looking into it. That night, I sat in my motel room nursing a warm beer, staring at the faded wallpaper, and wondering whether Elise had been lying to me since day one, or if she'd just gotten pulled under by the wrong person at the worst time. I stared at the message for a long time. Elise again. Cameron, can you please call me? The bank's saying something about fraud, and Liam was arrested driving your truck. I don't know what's going on. I didn't reply right away. Instead I typed, who is Patrick Dorsey? The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then returned again, then nothing. A minute later, I don't know what you're talking about. I responded, 14,600, multiple transfers, house listing. No answer for almost 15 minutes. Then, it's not what you think. I powered off my phone and went to sleep. The next morning, Grant called. The Bureau wants a meeting, he said. They've been watching Carter and Dorsey for months. You might be the case that finally brings everything together. For the first time since Elise had blindsided me with that email, I felt something that resembled satisfaction. Not because my marriage had collapsed, but because the mask was starting to slip and the truth was getting oxygen. I met the agents at the field office downtown, Agent Navarro and Agent King. We went over everything. They recorded my statement, scanned all the documents Grant and I had compiled. This fits a pattern we've been trying to lock down, Navarro explained. With your statement and the financial records, we can show clear coordination. This moves it from coincidence to conspiracy. What about Elise? I asked. She's my wife, ex-wife. The agents exchanged glances. We're still assessing her role, King replied. Did she ever bring up money problems or seem unusually stressed? I remembered. She'd been talking about downsizing for months, said we were stretched too thin. I disagreed. We were comfortable, and the mortgage was manageable. Navarro jotted that down. When did that start? About half a year ago, around the same time she must have met Carter. And the refinance? King asked. Never discussed it. She forged my signature while I was deployed. They kept asking questions, writing everything down. When we wrapped, Navarro handed me her card. We'll be in touch. And don't reach out to your wife or Carter directly. We're building something bigger here. I nodded. Got it. That night, I drove through the old neighborhood again and parked a few houses down from what used to be our place. Carter's truck was back. Guess he'd gotten it released. Elise's car wasn't there. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Elise. We need to talk face to face. Meet me tomorrow at Jefferson Green. And just like that, the air changed. I showed the text to Grant over breakfast the next morning. He glanced at it and shook his head. Don't go. Nothing good can come from meeting her right now. I won't, I said, but I do want to see what she's up to while she thinks I'm heading to meet her. At 9:30 a.m., Grant and I parked across the street from the house. At 9:45, Elise stepped outside, got into her SUV, and drove off, heading straight toward Jefferson Green. Now what? Grant asked. Now we wait, I told him. 20 minutes later, another car pulled into the driveway. Real estate company logo on the door. Patrick Dorsey. Liam stepped out to greet him. They exchanged a few words, then went inside. Should we follow them? Grant asked. I shook my head. No need. I installed cloud-based cameras last year. Full interior and exterior coverage. Grant raised an eyebrow. You never mentioned that. Never had a reason to, I said, unlocking my phone. I opened the security app and turned the screen so he could see. Dorsey and Liam stood in the living room. Dorsey was snapping photos while Liam pointed around the space like he owned it. I turned the volume up. Should list by the end of the week, Dorsey was saying. Got a buyer lined up already. Cash, like usual. How much? Liam asked. $420. We asked for $470, but the offer's solid. Everyone walks away happy. What about her husband? Elise says he's starting to cause problems. Dorsey waved it off. Military types always talk big. They've got orders, responsibilities. They can't afford to dig in. He'll settle just to move on. I glanced at Grant. You getting all this? He was already screen recording the live feed. Every word. I forwarded the cloud access link to Agent Navarro, along with a 2-word message, happening now. 30 minutes later, I watched as a dozen unmarked vehicles pulled up. FBI agents fanned out, jackets zipped up tight, faces set. From our position down the block, Grant and I watched as they led both Dorsey and Liam out in cuffs. My phone buzzed. It was Navarro. We got them on tape discussing fraudulent sale, wire fraud, and conspiracy to sell property they didn't own, she said. We'll need your full statement later. Of course. And Mr. Briggs, Elise just pulled up. She looks shaken. I looked down the street. There she was, standing barefoot on the grass, hands over her mouth, staring as agents carried out boxes of documents from the home we once shared. What happens to her? I asked. Navarro paused. That depends. On how much she knew, and on what you want. I watched Elise for a long moment. 13 years of marriage, good years in the beginning, before it all turned into this. I just want what's fair, I said. That was it. The federal case advanced quickly. Liam and Dorsey both accepted plea deals, turning on each other and revealing a broader network operating across 3 states, specifically targeting military households. Elise insisted she had no idea what she'd been caught up in. Claimed Liam had convinced her I was hiding assets, planning to abandon her with nothing. Said the refinance was all his doing, and she'd simply gone along. Maybe she was telling the truth, maybe not. Either way, she agreed to a settlement. Complete reimbursement of the stolen funds, forfeiture of any future claim on the house or my military benefits, and a signed confession admitting to the forged signature. In return, I chose not to press criminal charges. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that message from the desert. No fault, a clean break, considering all that had happened. The day the last document was processed, Agent Navarro called. Liam Harper was sentenced this morning. 8 years for fraud, conspiracy, and identity theft. Dorsey got 12. Figured you'd want to know. I thanked her. Then she added, we uncovered evidence they'd pulled the same scheme on 11 other military families. Your case helped us connect the dots. They might finally get some justice because of you. After we hung up, I sat on the porch of my rented place, watching the sun dip behind the trees, thinking of the others. Soldiers who deployed believing their homes and relationships were solid, only to come back to silence and loss. I never intended to unravel a criminal network. I just wanted what was mine. But life has a way of rewriting the script when you least expect it. My phone buzzed. Text from Elise. I never wanted things to end this way. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. A year later, I sold the house. Couldn't stomach staying there anymore. Too many ghosts in the drywall. I used the proceeds to buy a small cabin near Hamilton, Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres, and a stream out back. No neighbors in sight. I took early retirement from the service. 20 years was enough. I'd done my part. I adopted a German shepherd named Ranger and started picking up small carpentry jobs for folks in town. Nothing big, just enough to keep me moving and keep the lights on. My retirement checks covered what carpentry didn't. Now and then, Elise crossed my mind, mostly in passing. James mentioned she'd moved back to her hometown in Oregon, got another front desk job at a dental clinic, trying to rebuild, I suppose. I didn't carry any bitterness anymore. Truthfully, I didn't feel much of anything when it came to her. She made her decisions. So did I. One evening, a letter arrived from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband served in the Navy. He'd been deployed overseas when Liam and Dorsey tried pulling the same stunt on her. The FBI had given her my name. You don't know me, she wrote, but because of you, my kids still have their home. Thank you for standing up when walking away would have been easier. I read that letter twice and tacked it to the fridge. Some days, when the quiet was too heavy or the memories too sharp, I'd glance at it and remember that something decent had come out of the wreckage. Last I heard, Liam was still locked up. So was Dorsey. For once, the system did what it was supposed to do. As for me, I was figuring things out again, day by day, in peace and quiet, slowly shaping a life no one else could touch, fake, or take away. A life that finally, truly, belonged to me.